Bunch of cool stuff. I'll do another video talking about that. But most importantly, what do I want to talk about now? It's balance. So let's take a look here. Guys, we have a new post community update, March 6th, 2018 on the Battle.net forums. Balance team says, hey guys, we've received feedback that Protoss early game options are currently limited in the Protoss vs Zerg matchup due to the potential of very early Zergling drop builds. Protoss players were having trouble holding off these early attacks without the help of a Stargate and thus gravitated towards opening with a safe Stargate in most games. So as to open up the early game for Protoss players, we'll be looking to change the Overlord's Mutate Ventral Sax upgrade requirement from Evo Chamber to Lair. So what that means is you can't get drops until you've got a Lair. So no early elevators. And that makes me very sad, guys, because that's how I cheese a lot of games in all matchups. I love dropping Lings in Terran's bases at the start. I mean, the biggest thing I'm sad about is if this goes through my Zerg vs Zerg build where I fill up 2 Overlords with Banelings, I completely skip Ling speed, and then I just drop Banelings in the natural and the main at the same time at 4 minutes into the game. That build will be ripped. It will be gone. I've won a ton of games with that build, even though it feels like it should never work. So that would be really sad if I lose that. On the other hand, I think, there's been a lot of discussion. Without the Mothership Core, it is very hard to be 100% solid versus drops, right? You can defend, and 90% of the time, like I did a coaching video, and I've talked about it a lot on stream, how 90% of the time, people aren't really executing their Zerg all-ins that well. And usually if you're just better at walling off the front, you scout for the drop every game, you'll be okay. But it is really hard to be 100% against, and it is making the matchup very uncomfortable. I know community-wise, there's been a lot of outrage. So as much as I'm always the guy who's sitting there like, guys, chill, hold your horses, get better at reacting rather than complaining about it, fair enough. I think this one's okay. It's really tough to defend. Big thanks to the support. Pace yourself with the 5-month resub. Hi, my name is David with the 3-month resub. So overall, I do think the Overlord drop being removed here is not too bad. Demi in chat, very high level Zerg players says, I actually like this change. It's kind of stale at the moment because every Protoss opens Stargate because they're so worried about the Zergling drop, and getting out the Oracle and the Phoenix makes you very safe against it. And this will help bring back some of those other openings because it was really hard to defend drop plus Ling Flood openings with things like Twilight Council Adepts and that sort of stuff. So, you know what? I'm okay with this. I think, honestly, it did feel like in Legacy of the Void, Zerg had the most kind of weird, crazy all-ins, right? In all matchups, right? There's these weird elevator builds. They were kind of hard to factor in, especially for mid and low-level players, but even for high-level players. So I'm okay with this change. I'm always kind of fine with the game getting mixed up a little bit. There's always like a weighing act, right? I'm sure on Blizzard's part where they're like, you know what? This does make it harder for people who haven't played in a little while. They're going to come back, shit's changed, and that's confusing. But on the other hand, it's going to keep the game fresh, right? For the people who are willing to kind of relearn things a little bit. And I think this is a small enough change. It should be pretty cool. So anyway, that one I'm kind of okay with, guys. A little bit sad because it will, lose some cheesy builds, which I love to do. But here's the big one, guys. Next, we've been seeing a lot of games where anti-armor missile spam becomes the determining factor. I love that they used spam in their actual PR worded post here. The anti-armor missile spam becomes the determining factor in late game in all 3 Terran matchups. The anti-armor missile is intended to combo with core units such as Marines, Marauders, Liberators, and Cyclones, not to be massed purely for damage. I'll show you guys. I'll show you guys some clips of that while I talk about it. As is currently the case, thus we'd like to reduce the damage of anti-armor missiles to reinforce its intended function. At the same time, since Terrans are currently relying on the Raven for their late game power, reducing the anti-armor missile damage would rein that strategy in. We think this would provide a good opportunity to give Terrans a bit more late game help in the form of a buff to the Viking. Vikings are often perceived as being weaker in the current metagame than they were before, partially due to recent changes to other races. We're proposing a health buff from 125 hit points to 135, which will not only change the unit's relationship against anti-air ground units and late game air units, but also against area of effect spells commonly used against them, such as Parasitic Bomb and Psionic Storm. So here is a big takeaway and a little bit of give back on this one. I think honestly you could probably throw the Vikings hit point up to like a 150. it's just such a fragile unit in late game. But I like the thought process. I gotta say, I like the thought process because honestly, Vikings for anti-air is always like, yeah. You know, you guys watch me when I play against Broodlords. When I'm playing mech, it's 90% Thors and Hellbats, and I just throw some Vikings in to try to force them to build Corruptors, right? I don't want to build a lot of Vikings because the moment you have a lot of Vikings, they're just gonna die to Parasitic Bomb or Fungal. They're really hard to control. They're super fragile. We have people in chat saying 150 HP still wouldn't even make a difference. They'd still be shit. I hate Vikings. I feel you guys. Honestly, though, you know, it's basically let's return it to the state it was before the anti-armor missile. People realized that it could just be spammed in fights and destroy stuff, and let's start looking at other ways of dealing, fixing it up. So, the one thing which is really sad is I just played basically my first game spamming anti-armor missiles, and it felt overpowered as fuck, and it felt really good, and I like killing stuff. And it was really funny, just turning Zerg armies orange. On the other side, obviously it's like, okay, we saw air fleets of Tempests and Carriers get destroyed by this. I'm gonna find you guys some VODs. Yeah, let's go look up some VODs while we talk about this. But there was also a lot of games where I think players just clumped their shit up and didn't react properly against what they were facing. I think there was a lot of times where players just kind of derped in over and over again and kept like kind of headbutting into the units and didn't really take the fights correctly. So, oh, this is a rerun VOD. This is not the right one. Let me find a Maru vs Solar. Where is Maru Solar? Either Maru Solar or Maru SOS. Both matches where we got to see some. There we go. Here we go, Maru Solar. Where we got to see some anti-armor missile spam. Let's go to the last game. The last game was the one where we saw a ton. Okay, so Solar played this last game really poorly, in my opinion. I was kind of watching it, and I was like, okay, cool. The anti-armor missile functions a lot like Storm or Fungal. You need to kind of, you know, spread your stuff out. You can't clump up. Things like Corruptors and Hydras. Not going to be able to jump on top of Ravens anymore, unless you've done a huge, like, spread on, like, 3 or 4 screens, right? Okay? What did Solar do repeatedly in this series? He just was like, Ravens! And he'd run at them in a clump with his Hydras and Corruptors and get everything destroyed. And so I think the one thing which kind of balanced the anti-armor missile in the way it worked is the fact that it was still 75 energy. And you'd see players get up to like these 13 or 14 Ravens, right? Where they get basically, if they're all at max energy, they get 2 big volleys most of the time because there's a lot of action going on. They only get 1 volley, which can actually kill big units, right? A few volleys to kill units like Hydras. So the thing is, if you don't clump up, they can't just blanket your whole army when you're spread. If you're spread across a whole screen in a huge concave, they couldn't kill you. But look at this. Clumps up, all of his Corruptors and Broodlords. And we only saw about 7 or 8 missiles there basically obliterate his army. And this happened repeatedly in this series, like over and over again. And these are obviously the situations where, I'm like, okay, people see this. I know Twitch chat is screaming, anti-armor missile bullshit, orange Broodlord skin. Oh my God, where do I get this orange Broodlord skin from? And at the same time, it's easy as the balance designer team to say, oh yeah, this looks way too powerful. But on the other hand, if you see someone move their army like that when there's Fungal and Parasitic Bomb around or Storm around, what do we say? We don't say, oh my God, Fungal OP, Storm OP. Well, some people do. But we, the balance team, pros will say, well, you got to spread your shit out at this stage of the game. You can't just run your army around in a big ball. At this stage of the game, often what you'll find, right, is it ends up being you don't control your whole army on one control group. You're moving forward, trying to land spells, pulling back. You're kind of moving in, you're trying to harass around the edges, and you're really avoiding ever just moving your army as one big control group because it'll clump up and it'll get wrecked by spells. And I really feel like, especially in this game, because Solar, I think, was in a pretty good position earlier in this game, if I remember correctly. If he actually was spreading his shit out and, the Ravens come forward, you drop a Parasitic Bomb, and most importantly, Fungal. Fungal is amazing versus Ravens. As are Infested Terrans, he never went Infestors this game. He just kept building Corruptors and Hydras, and I was like, oh, yeah, he finally built Infestors here in the later stage, and watch him just headbutt. I'm gonna just fast forward a minute here, and we're gonna find the worst use of Infestors and Brood. Like he just keeps kind of coming forward with his army in a clump. Like here, it's like Broodlords. What are they doing? Right now, he should be landing Fungal and Parasitic Bomb on those Ravens. He's not doing it. And then he just is like, oh, I better punish you. Oh, let's get like some unit sniped. He kept doing this over and over again. So honestly, I feel like players aren't really adapting yet to it. Can we tone it down? Yes. Why? Okay, I'm showing you examples of Solar fucking up really hard. There was also, you know, stats moved out of position for half a second to dodge a nuke, and bam, he lost all of his carriers in Tempest because the Ravens came forward and dropped like 20 anti-armor missiles. And that was the moment you're like, okay, this does look really stupid, right? So for me, I kind of feel like what's really cool about anti-armor missile is it does allow Terran players to actually have some sort of AoE spell that punishes the fuck out of their opponents for clumping up, which they don't normally have. Yes, you've got Siege Tank Splash, not quite the same, not as easy to kind of, you can't, you know, you've got to siege that shit up, it's very slow, right? But like Storm and Fungal and Parasitic Bomb, I think, have always been this super powerful late game thing, where you punish your opponent if they clump up their units, and Terran has kind of lacked that. So what I've enjoyed with the Ravens, both playing as it and watching it, is like, oh cool, you can actually slow your opponent. Like your opponent can't just headbutt in now. They've got to be a bit more clever with how they break you. Now, maybe that's too strong when paired with ghosts and tanks and planetary fortresses. I don't know. Maybe you want to nerf it back to 10 damage or 15 damage, but what they're doing is they are going to be nerfing it, or at least they're planning to just 5 flat area effect damage. So even if you launch like 20 of these, it's only going to do 100 damage, right? It's not there for the damage. It's basically only there for the anti-armor. Now, the problem with that is it returns the Raven to a super niche support spellcaster, and I love the design of spellcasters like that in RTS games, but StarCraft 2 doesn't really have spellcasters like that. A lot of other games, you'll get your spellcasters and they're like, I can speed up my other units, or I can buff this and buff that, but like they don't usually have these big game-ending damage spells. In StarCraft 2, you kind of do get a lot of big, massive spell damage. So when you add in a unit like the Raven, is like, I can knock a few armor off a unit, I can drop an auto turret right underneath me, I can detect, and Interference Matrix, I admit, is very cool. But like, for instance, Interference Matrix, not useful against Zerg in the early stages, because it only works on Zerg spellcasters. It only works on mechanical and psionic units, right? So it's like, what are you going to do? You know, disable some queens? It's like, still very cool against Protoss and Terran, but the Raven just, you know, not as cool against Zerg. Auto turret is nice for harassment, but with the 1 cast range, maybe a bit too weak. If they're going to do this, I'd like to see, I saw this proposed on Reddit or social media. I can't remember who said it. Someone was saying, if we're going to kind of keep the Raven a bit as a support spellcaster rather than a combat spellcaster, why not leave it with the auto turret, but give it the repair drone back as well. Give it a 4th spell. Things like, you know, oracles and stuff have had 4 spells before, right? Laser beam, revelation, stasis. There's only 3. I feel like there's spellcasters out there with 4 spells, right? I don't know. I reckon it'd be cool to give it the repair drone as well, because that was also a very niche ability, right? Helps long term. Not really going to be changing any combat because it heals so slowly, even though it's efficient over time. So I'm kind of on the fence with this, guys. I kind of feel like Terran have always been so much harder to micro in the late game, where you kind of need to just camp behind planetary fortresses. I thought the Raven anti-armor missile changed this. I think maybe they could allow it to have a bit more of a damage impact, but nerf it down to half the damage rather than 1/6 of the damage. I think something like that could be cool. These are my initial thoughts, guys. I have not sat here thinking about this. I'm very jet lagged. I only read the changes this morning after landing from my flight. Let's read what you guys are saying in chat, and let's actually have a bit of a discussion and see if there's anything you guys can point out that changes my mind on these things. They used to have the mineral shield, says Indie Critic Show. I don't think that ever made it into the live game though, right? Did it? Or it was in like the beta of Legacy of the Void, or beta of Heart of the Swarm, right? Indie Critic. How can fungal be dodged? Lol, you need to pre-spread. Oh, there's like a little bit of dodging with fungal, right? Because it is a projectile now. Obviously, if like you've got your Vikings clumped up, you're not dodging it, but you know, like there is like a slight bit of time to react compared to like, if you look at fungal and Wings of Liberty, trust me, you can dodge the current fungal a little bit, whereas before you couldn't at all. So there is a little bit there. What do you prefer, lowering the damage or increase the energy requirement per cast, says Last Talk? Yeah, perhaps that. I mean, maybe so what they wanted to do, right, because it wasn't getting used, is they made it a bigger AoE. It casts really fast as well, and it's got a good cast range. That's why it's so easy to land the spell, which is part of the problem with the anti-armor missile, right? Is you just like fucking throw a billion of them, right? You stack your ravens up and you just go and they fire so fast and they're really hard to dodge. Maybe you know, reduce the cast range or something like that, and you keep the damage the same. Honestly, I don't think there's like a right way to do it. Like I said, I would like to see it just go down to 15 damage, keep the same kind of casting of the spell, see how that plays out. Maybe make it just one less cast range or something like that, or slightly less AoE. But I don't know. I just kind of enjoyed it. Obviously, it's like I have a new toy. I want to play with it a bit longer. I haven't been on the receiving end of getting killed by it. The players who've tried to kill me with it, it's been in like Terran vs Zerg, and I've just been like lol lol lol, you know, because I use parasitic bomb and fungal and spread my stuff out. And I'm like, it's not that OP. Obviously that's also because I play like swarm host style versus mech a lot of the time, so it's quite easy to engage with just spells and free units. Thank you so much, Jojo Power Ranger. Appreciate the 6-month resub. So DPS of fungal and storm is capped, says WigiWhack. But so with those, they might be big game-changing damage spells, WigiWhack's basically saying. But you know what? He says, you know, they're not insta-kill, though. You can't just throw 6 storms down on top of each other and wipe out a ton of Thors or battlecruisers, right? That's a good point, WikiWhack. And maybe you could put some sort of artificial damage cap on it. Flame Strike. In Warcraft 3, there was a lot of artificial damage caps on splash damage. I think like Flame Strike, maybe even Blizzard. Maybe did Blizzard have it? I can't remember. I haven't played Warcraft 3 in forever, but I remember like Flame Strike could only do a certain amount of damage. I remember realizing this as a kid. I was like, oh, I'm hitting like 7 units. And then I'm like, oh, it's not doing as much damage as normally, because it would say, yeah, it does, you know, 60 damage a second, maximum overall damage of 400 damage. So if you hit 20 units with this, they're all going to take less damage. Maybe you could do something like that. Definitely part of the problem with anti-armor missile is its ability to just kind of go, bam, drop 20 at once and just blow up a whole air fleet. And maybe just making it harder to cast, maybe lowering the damage, like I said here, you know, is definitely one of the options. I feel like the mana is already like the limiting factor. Like Ravens are so hard to get out for Terran, but at the same time, the problem is if you give Terran an extremely powerful late game spellcaster, the combination of that with mules is too good, right? Because then they can sacrifice most of their SCVs, have a way bigger overall army supply, where they've got 30 Ravens and a good regular army as well, because they're only on 20 SCVs mining gas. The rest is just mules mining minerals. So, you know, maybe it's that and the power of planetary fortresses and missile turrets and the building armor upgrade that makes it so, like, you can't really have the Raven be a combat unit. I don't know. Excuse me. So I see a lot of people bring up the game design. You know, they wanted to reduce game-ending moments. You know, the anti-armor missile's really bad. That's why there's no place for it in the game. And a lot of people are on the opinion that this is a great change. I'm kind of with you guys on that, right? You know, I definitely agree that, like, it's a little bit brutal, but yeah, I don't know. There's like that part of me that's like, but what about the Terrans? Why don't we give them a powerful spellcaster? But it is too strong, right? So yeah, I guess I'm okay with this change. I'm a little bit sad I'm losing a toy. I kind of wish it went to 10 damage or 15 damage and still was like a bit spammable, because it's still, you still need to spend a lot of energy to do it. People can still spread their units. I don't know. I just want to toy with it a bit longer. I'm going to be playing with it for a week or two. We'll see where it goes. Who knows? Maybe I'm going to totally change my mind, release another video, and I will talk about it in a completely different way. We'll see how we go. Okay, guys. Make it a damage over time and unstackable, says Gallery. Yeah, you could do something like that. Just like Storm or Fungal. It's like once you're hit, it's like you take damage over a few seconds and it doesn't stack. I think, yeah, maybe that's another cool way to do it, Gallery, in which case they should boost the damage to like 50 or 60. Because obviously then you know, every time you go forward to cast one, it's like, wow, you can't just spam them all at once. Maybe even more. Maybe, you know, probably 50 or 60 since it's so easy to get off, I guess. But that would be cool. I think that would be really cool. 6 months on that resub. Thank you, Jojo. Supply of ravens to 4 instead of 2. And that way they can't be massed as easily. That's a good suggestion from Imperfection. That's cool. Oh, I've got to read the comments. Okay, guys. All right, we're finished the analytical part of the video. If there's any really good questions, pointers in chat which I missed, can you guys repost it with the @x5_pig tag? I think I mentioned most of the important ones. For now, guys, I've been told I have to read the BattleNet comments because apparently there's some juicy ones in here. So the first response from My Oh Mind says, "Is there anything about Neo Steel Frame? It's been 8 years, guys." Why are we talking about Neo Steel Frame? Who cares? It's so funny. That's a meme, right? That's a meme. That's got to be a meme. This has been a thing. I've been seeing quite a few people like angrily talking about this on like Reddit lately, and I'm like, oh, these guys are joking, right? They're like, you guys haven't changed the Neo. Okay, if you guys who don't know, Neo Steel Frame is the bunker. You get the upgrade and you can put 6 units in the bunker, 6 Marines rather than 4. No one ever gets it. It's kind of useless. You don't really use bunkers in the late game anyway. You use planetary fortresses and turrets and stuff, right? But people have been like, why don't you guys make this ability use more? And it's like, who cares? It's like a niche ability you make if you really want. People are like, there shouldn't be abilities that don't get used. Thrasher says, and there goes Terran's late game splash. Not too happy about that. Goba says, I was sure that the anti-armor missile would be cut to 10. 5, much the better. This is a very good patch. It addresses really core issues, and in a very long time, there are not Protoss nerfs. I can't even tell. Is it meant to be sarcastic? I'm so confused. Okay, so there's clearly a Terran player angry about Protoss, right? I love these forums. They're so great. These changes are good, but why do you continue to ignore battle cruisers? Also, I think a slight nerf to the Thor's splash attack and a slight buff to its heavy cannons would be a good move. Oh, that's actually not too bad. I thought this guy was going to whine about battle cruisers really hard. That's cool. I'm okay with someone hopping in the thread and just... it seems to be a BattleNet forum thing. No matter what the balance changes, people hop in and they're like, what about my favorite unit? Or what about my favorite spell? And I'm like, this is super random, but fair enough. Facepalm, Terran finally finds something that works barely in the late game. And he gets the nerf hammer with no compensation buff. And the nerf is really freaking severe too. Yep, I'm done with this game. Okay, people aren't too happy at all with this, are they? Oof. Oof. Interesting changes, but you left out the part where you address Protoss' late game imbalance versus Zerg and Terran from nerf Protoss. Alright, I'm not going to read anymore. Let's finish this. This is incredible. Oh, I've got to click on a YouTube link apparently. There's a YouTube link. So this guy just linked a YouTube video. All right, we're gonna... It's a safe link. It's a YouTube link. To finish up the video, guys, let's see.
Christmas, my dudes. It is Christmas, my dudes.
All right. And with that, we'll finish up this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. And I'll keep you guys updated on my thoughts as the patch comes out and as I test it out. So guys, I just wanted